Welcome, traveler of the night. The world outside has gone quiet, the lights have dimmed, and now it is only you, the dark, and the voice that carries you through it. Tonight's tale is not meant to wake you, but to walk beside you as you drift, step by step, into the fragile space between waking and sleep. Let the rhythm of the story guide you. Let the shadows lean closer, because once the night has claimed the world, there are stories that can only be told in whispers. So settle in. Close your eyes if you dare, and listen. The Airbnb nightmare in Arizona. The night in the Airbnb began with an unsettling realization about the sleeping arrangements, but the real horror was yet to unfold, shrouded in darkness and drunken confusion. The next morning I woke up with a throbbing headache, my mouth drier than the Arizona desert. But that wasn't the worst of it. What I saw next to my bed made my blood run cold. The initial day in Arizona had been a whirlwind of awe and physical exertion. Mark, with his seemingly endless stamina, practically bounced along the Bright Angel Trail at the Grand Canyon, while I, Alex, huffed and puffed, my lungs burning. Every step felt like a monumental effort, my calves screaming, but Mark just laughed, urging me to keep up, completely unfazed. He'd point out some distant rock formation, full of energy, while I was just trying not to collapse. We took a million amazing pictures, those bright, smiling photos now feeling like a twisted lie, a veneer over the growing unease. It was beautiful, yes, but underneath that beauty, a subtle, creeping dread was beginning to take root. Later that evening, after a long drive back to Phoenix and a much-needed midday nap, we plunged into the city's vibrant bar scene. Mark seemed to know all the spots, effortlessly navigating the crowds. We matched each other drink for drink, or so I believed. Shot for shot, beer for beer, the tab growing higher with each passing hour. Yet, as the hours melted into a blurry haze, I found myself inexplicably, intensely drunk, far more than Mark, who seemed remarkably lucid, almost unnervingly so, despite consuming the exact same amount. My head spun, my vision blurred, words slurred on my tongue, but he was still cracking jokes, his eyes clear. Was he deliberately trying to incapacitate me? That thought, murky and unsettling at the time, now screams like a siren in my mind. It's a terrifying question to ask yourself. Did someone I trusted actively try to make me vulnerable? We eventually stumbled back to the Airbnb. Or rather, I stumbled. Mark, still somehow energetic, blasted music, a jarring cacophony in my buzzing head. I remember fumbling with my phone, blindly plugging it in next to the pull-out couch. The soft glow of the screen, the last thing I saw before oblivion. Then, silence. For a while, anyway. Hours later, a desperate bladder woke me from a deep, almost drugged sleep. My mouth felt like sandpaper, drier than the desert sand outside. As I crept towards the bathroom, a faint click echoed through the dark apartment. It was quiet, subtle, but distinct. Mark's bedroom door. Locked. I paused, my senses on high alert despite the lingering haze. What was that? My drunk brain, ever eager to rationalize, dismissed it. Just my imagination, I told myself, blaming my impaired state. I finished in the bathroom, tried his door just to confirm, and yep, locked. Whatever, I thought, and crawled back to the couch, surprisingly falling back asleep with ease. But the next morning, my phone was unplugged and sitting on a nearby table, not where I'd left it charging on the floor next to the couch bed. Again, I shrugged it off as a drunken mishap, a minor oddity in a night of forgettable blurriness. It was easy to deny then, wasn't it? When you don't want to believe something truly sinister is happening, the real tension ratcheted up on the final night. We'd explored more of Phoenix that day, though I actively avoided drinking after the previous night's unsettling experience. But Mark, ever persistent, managed to convince me to have a few drinks later on. And wouldn't you know it, it was another night of getting really drunk. Our flight was the next afternoon, so at least we didn't have to wake up at the crack of dawn. We got back to the Airbnb late again, probably between 1 and 2 a.m. Then Mark, with an almost unnerving insistence, suggested I take the actual bed in his room, claiming it was only fair since I'd been on the couch. I didn't argue. Exhausted, emotionally drained, and still a bit buzzed, I just wanted to sleep. I tossed my bag into the room, mumbled a quick goodnight, and shut the door. I didn't lock it, a decision that still makes my stomach churn with regret. Not that it would have mattered much. The doorknob had one of those flimsy locks you could probably open with a butter knife. I wish I could say the story ended there, that we went home in peace the next day, but it didn't. I woke up again, probably not long after I finally drifted off. I didn't know what woke me at first. It was that unsettling feeling of having heard something, a sound that pierced your sleep without fully registering, just enough to yank you awake. My heart thumped against my ribs. I looked around the dark room, and then, a surge of panic. My phone was gone. The charging cord dangled uselessly from the outlet. A silent accusation. How could this happen again? Frantically, my eyes darted to the floor beside the bed, then the other side. And that's when a raw, primal scream tore from my throat. Mark was sprawled there, face down, on the floor next to the bed, like a broken doll. He shot up, looking utterly bewildered, feigning confusion. "What are you doing?" I shrieked, my voice cracking. He looked around the room, acting like he'd just woken from a deep sleep, like he didn't know how he got there. He mumbled something about being blacked out and just stumbling in, then remembering I was in the bed. So he crashed on the floor. But that didn't make sense. He was on the far side of the bed, further from the door. It was an awkward, deliberate position. I then accused him, my voice trembling with fury, of taking my phone. He played dumb, suggesting I check under the bed. Maybe it fell. Then, with a practiced ease that made my skin crawl, he got on his knees, looked under the bed, and instantly, almost too quickly, announced, "Bro, here it is." He pulled it out. Looking at him in that moment, it was like staring at a completely different person. The easygoing, fun-loving guy was gone. Who was this cold, calculated stranger? Did he really try getting into my phone twice? The air thickened with his palpable deception. I knew, deep down, despite the lingering alcohol fog, that something profoundly unsettling was at play. This wasn't just drunkenness. This was something darker, something predatory. I told him I'd just go back to the couch, needing to escape his presence, but he insisted he would, and then, mercifully, he left the room. You bet your ass I locked that flimsy door this time. If it weren't for the phone, sure, I might have rationalized it as a really drunk guy doing something goofy, like passing out on the floor, but I was detecting something there, a pattern, a cold intention. He took my phone, and I knew it. Since I was still kind of drunk, oddly enough, I didn't really have much trouble falling back asleep, which, looking back, is its own kind of horrifying. Once again, I wish it ended there, but it didn't. I woke up one more time that night, and this time I quickly, horrifyingly realized why. At the foot of my bed, a dark silhouette of Mark stood perfectly still, just watching. His presence filled the room, oppressive and chilling. For some reason, I didn't scream, didn't jump. My body was frozen, a primal fear seizing me. He sat down on the bed, just a foot from me, and then, slowly, deliberately, he started rubbing my foot. That's when the scream finally erupted, raw and primal, tearing from the deepest part of my gut. "Get out!" I roared, my voice hoarse with terror. He wouldn't move, just sat there, his hand still on my foot. So, fueled by sheer adrenaline and absolute disgust, I had to physically shove him off the bed and out the bedroom door. He didn't resist. He just got up, moved to the living room, and sat upright on the couch, watching me, like a creepy NPC in a video game, unblinking, silent, as I frantically packed my bag. Every shirt, every toiletry, every single item was shoved in with trembling hands. It was the most unsettling part, his utter silence, his unwavering, vacant stare. He didn't say a word, he just watched. I called an Uber to the airport, my voice shaky as I gave the address. I wasn't staying there another minute. He didn't try to stop me. I got to the airport just as the sun began to paint the sky with hues of orange and pink. A beautiful sunrise completely lost on me. As hard as I tried to sleep, I couldn't. My mind raced, replaying every disturbing detail, every unsettling glance, every manipulative word. The entire wait for the flight was agonizing. I paid like $35 to change my seat on the plane, just to ensure I wouldn't be next to him, staring out the window during boarding to keep from making eye contact. The plane felt like a sanctuary, a metal bird carrying me away from a nightmare. Later that day, after I had finally processed the trauma and the sheer audacity of what had happened, I finally told my friends. "See, I told you he was weird," they said, almost in unison, pointing out how he was always alone when we ran into him. It hit me then, a sickening realization. He must have seen my Instagram story about Tyler's birthday, pinpointed my location, and shown up. This wasn't coincidence. This was actual stalker behavior. I immediately blocked his number and his Instagram, but before I did, a flicker of an idea, a desperate need for answers, made me scroll through his old posts. No one was tagged in his group photos, but I found a comment from a guy who looked like he'd been in a picture with Mark. They weren't even following each other. I took a chance and messaged him. His reply, 10 minutes later, sent a profound chill down my spine, validating every terrifying instinct. Nah, guy's a freak. Run away. From there, he unloaded, telling me about his own unsettling experiences with Mark, and how all their old friends had been forced to cut him off. The guy even untagged himself from Mark's photo, though he said he couldn't force Mark to take the picture down entirely. He wasn't surprised at all when I told him what had happened in Arizona. His response? A chillingly casual, "Guy should be in jail." My worst fears were confirmed. Mark wasn't just some weird dude looking for a bro. He was a potentially dangerous predator. A chilling confirmation of the gut feeling I'd had all along. I still, to this day, just want to know what he was trying to access on my phone. What information was so important that he would risk everything for it? And how many other people has he done this to? The lingering chill of that Arizona encounter made me question everything I thought I knew about summer and strangers, realizing how easily trust can be shattered. But it wasn't long before another chilling tale from a different coastline emerged, equally unsettling in its mysterious nature, reminding me that danger can lurk anywhere, even in the most idyllic settings. The figure on the shore, Ocean City's pale watcher. That lingering chill from Arizona made me question everything I thought I knew about strangers. But it wasn't long before another tale, from a completely different coastline, emerged. A story equally unsettling, shrouded in a truly inexplicable mystery. It was last summer, mid-July. College was out, and I, Kyle, was home in Maryland, trying to soak up every second of freedom before another semester started. My two closest friends, Jason and Marcus, and I, we were itching to do something. Just the three of us, like the old high school days. You know, before different colleges scattered us across state lines. We finally settled on it. A weekend beach trip to Ocean City. Jason's family had this small beach house there. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom spot a few blocks off the sand. Perfect for what we needed. Chilling out, maybe a little partying, and just catching up. We rolled into town late Friday afternoon. The air was thick, humid, clinging to your skin, the kind that promises a scorcher. You could taste the salt, smell the sunscreen the second we got out of the car. We hit the boardwalk, lost a few bucks in the arcades, and just people watched. The beach was absolutely packed, a chaotic symphony of screaming kids, umbrellas, coolers, and lifeguards constantly yelling at folks. It all felt normal, just a classic summer day. Later, back at the house, we grilled burgers, tossed back a few drinks, and got into some stupid drinking games. By midnight, we were all pretty buzzed, a little bored, and someone, I think it was Marcus, just blurted it out. "Let's go back to the beach. There's something about the ocean at night, right? It's completely different. Empty. Peaceful. The air cools down. The waves sound louder." We didn't plan on swimming, just hanging out, maybe walking along the shore. So, we grabbed some hoodies, our phones, and a dying flashlight Jason found. Down a side street we went, onto the wooden boardwalk, then clomped down the steps onto the sand. Just as expected, it was practically deserted. The waves rolled in with a steady, rhythmic hush. The only light came from a few distant lamps, and the moon, peeking through some clouds. We could barely make out the water meeting the shore. We walked along the edge, letting the cold water kiss our ankles, cracking jokes, talking about nothing and everything, just killing time. Eventually, we stopped near one of those wooden lifeguard towers, the kind they leave propped up at night, and just flopped down in the sand, staring up at the sky. That's when Jason, always the observant one, stiffened. "Is that someone walking over there?" he asked, sitting bolt upright. We all sat up, squinting into the darkness he was pointing at. At first, I saw nothing, just a dark blur near the shoreline. But then, yeah, I saw it. A figure. Just a silhouette, really, moving slowly right where the water met the sand, maybe 50 or 60 yards away. We figured, whatever, probably just some other person out late. maybe on a stroll. But then we noticed it. Its movement was off. It wasn't a casual stroll. This was stiff, slow, almost mechanical. Its arms didn't swing naturally. Its posture was just strange. Head tilted down, but not quite. It looked like it was staring at the sand, maybe scanning for something. We all just stopped talking, watching in quiet, uncomfortable fascination. Something about it put me on edge, made the hairs on my arms stand up. What the hell are they doing? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Marcus suggested they might be looking for something. Jason, always trying to lighten the mood, joked it was probably some drunk tourist who dropped their keys. We gave a nervous chuckle and tried to go back to messing around, but my eyes kept darting back to the person. A few minutes crawled by and then I noticed it had stopped. It wasn't walking anymore, just standing completely still, and definitely closer, maybe 30 yards away now. That's when the discomfort really set in. We tried not to stare, definitely tried not to shine our light at them, but it was getting impossible to ignore. There was just something profoundly wrong about the whole thing. Marcus finally broke the silence, his voice tight. They've been standing there for like 5 minutes. Who just stands like that? Then Jason said something that made my stomach drop into my shoes. He's not just standing, he whispered, his voice hushed. He's looking at you, Kyle. I didn't know if he was joking. I kind of laughed, nervously. Nah, man, he's looking at the sand. But Jason shook his head, a grim line to his lips. Number, look closer. His head's tilted at you. And then, before I could even object, Jason pointed the flashlight. I didn't want him to do it. Honestly, not at that moment. But he clicked it on, aimed the beam. The light hit the figure for just a second, a fleeting, horrifying glimpse, before the battery gave up and flickered out. But that single second was enough. I saw him. He was almost grayish-white. No shirt. He wore wet jeans clearly soaked from the ocean. His arms hung completely limp at his sides. His head was tilted at a weird, unnatural angle. Not broken, but disturbingly so. And his eyes were wide open, almost bulging, fixed right on us. The very second that beam of light hit him, he moved. Fast. Without any hesitation. No wind-up. No shift in weight. He broke into an unnatural, full sprint, straight at us. It was like he just launched himself forward. All three of us screamed. A primal, terrified sound. And we bolted. We didn't even look back. We just ran, our feet pounding into the wet sand. I could hear Marcus behind me yelling, "Go! Go!" My lungs were burning, air tearing in and out. We ran all the way back to the steps leading up to the boardwalk, scrambled up them, and didn't stop until we hit the street. Only then, gasping for breath, did we dare turn around. He wasn't there. The beach was empty. No footprints behind us, just the endless sound of waves crashing. We stood there, frozen, trying desperately to make sense of what just happened. We didn't talk much on the walk back to the house. When we got inside, we locked every single door and window, pulled the blinds shut, and stayed up until the sun finally started to rise. None of us could sleep. I kept expecting to hear a knock, or to see that pale face pressed against a window, but thankfully it never came. The next morning, we tried to laugh it off, tried to say it was just some cracked-out homeless guy trying to scare people. But deep down, none of us believed that. The way he moved, the way he appeared out of nowhere, the lack of footprints, it made no sense. We stayed one more night in the house, but we didn't leave it. We left early the very next morning. Over the next few weeks, we tried to move on. But then Jason texted me one night. He'd been having dreams. The same dream. Over and over. He'd wake up and see the guy standing in the corner of his room, soaking wet, head tilted, just staring. No movement. No talking. Just standing there. I told him that was messed up. Chilling. But I didn't tell him. I was having the exact same dream. Everything was identical. The guy, the posture, just standing in my room, not moving, not talking. Sometimes I still wake up, thinking I hear the faint sound of wet footsteps in my hallway. But when I check, no one's there. Then, last week, almost a year later, I was scrolling through this local Ocean City Facebook group, one of those community pages where people post about local events and weird sightings. Someone had uploaded a photo they'd taken the night before, from the beach. It was grainy, dark, but I recognized it instantly. The post read, "Does anyone know who this creepy guy is that I saw standing by the water at like 1 a.m.? I clicked the photo. It was blurry, but I knew him. Same posture, same pale skin, just looking down at the water. The comments chilled me even more. Dozens of people saying they'd seen him too. Some said he was there for hours. One person claimed they watched him walk into the water and never come back out. Another mentioned finding wet footprints on their back porch, 2 streets from the beach, with no prints leading to or from them. I don't know what we saw that night, I truly don't. But I know this. I'll never go back to that beach at night again. And if you ever find yourself walking along a quiet shore after dark, and you see a figure that moves just a little too wrong, remember this story. A midnight chase, terror on the water. While the chilling figure of Ocean City still haunts my dreams, another memory surfaces: a summer night on the New England coast that etched itself into my mind, reminding me just how vulnerable you can be when darkness falls on open water. I grew up in Massachusetts, and pretty much every summer, for as long as I can remember, I'd spend 3 months in a classic coastal New England town. You know the type if you've been to that part of the country. Think weathered shingle houses, a faint smell of salt and fried clams, and boats swaying gently in every harbor. I had a big group of friends who did the same, and we'd get into all sorts of trouble after our respective summer jobs. We were all teenagers, full of that restless energy that only summer break brings, always looking for something, anything, to break the monotony. I was 19 when this happened, like most of my crew, just old enough to feel invincible, but young enough to be truly, utterly dumb sometimes. One particular evening, my friend Emerson and I had this low-key plan: grab some beers, head out on his family's beat-up old boat, and just wait for the rest of our friends to show up. Classic summer night, right? Nothing fancy, just us in the calm bay. The boat itself was a relic, a faded blue fiberglass hull that had seen better decades, but it was ours for the night. We anchored between 2 other boats, bobbing gently as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples. It was peaceful, almost idyllic. You could hear the distant chatter from the other boats, the clinking of glasses, the faint murmur of music, just a typical, lazy summer evening. Then, the first weird thing happened. The 2 other boats, the ones flanking us, suddenly started pulling up anchor. No big deal, people leave. But they left, both of them. Not even a wave goodbye. It was just us, alone in the deepening twilight. The bay, once dotted with a few lights and the sounds of distant revelry, became a vast, inky expanse. The air seemed to grow heavier, quieter. I remember jokingly yelling out, "Hey, turn the music back on," into the fading light, my voice echoing a little too loudly in the sudden quiet. But there was only silence, just the gentle, almost rhythmic, lapping of waves against the hull. It was unsettling, the abruptness of it all, like the world had just emptied out around us. That's when we saw them. 3 silhouettes, sharp against the lingering glow of the western sky, standing on the edge of one of the now distant boats, just staring right at us. They were too far to make out faces, just dark, indistinct shapes, but the way they were positioned, unmoving, focused directly on us, felt incredibly deliberate. My first thought? Oh, probably just some other kids messing around trying to pull a prank. But Emerson, he felt it immediately. The shift in the air. He tensed up beside me, a nervous energy radiating off him. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on those figures. "Dude, they're looking at us," he muttered, his voice tight, barely above a whisper. "This isn't a joke." I, being me, tried to lighten the mood, or maybe just deny the creeping unease. I grabbed the boat's old megaphone, a relic from his dad's fishing trips, a battered, slightly corroded thing, and yelled something goofy through it. "Hey, you guys lost your party?" Just trying to be a clown, to break the tension that was suddenly thick in the air. But what came back, carried across the water, wasn't laughter or a shouted joke. It was a sinister, raspy laugh from one of the silhouettes, a sound that seemed to scrape against the night, dry and chilling, like dead leaves skittering across pavement. It wasn't human in its warmth or humor. It was a sound that crawled under my skin. That was the turning point for me. That was the moment my stomach dropped, and the casual fun evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp dread. My palms started to sweat. Then came the splashes. Sudden, loud. Two distinct plops into the water, cutting through the eerie silence. Two of the silhouettes were gone, swallowed by the darkness of the bay, leaving just one on the distant boat, still standing there, still staring. It was like watching a horror movie unfold in slow motion. Emerson, bless his quick thinking, didn't hesitate. He was already frantically yanking on the anchor rope, his muscles straining, pulling with an urgency I'd never seen from him before. Me? I was still a little dazed, half laughing, a nervous, almost hysterical sound. What are they doing? Are they swimming? The absurdity of it, the sheer audacity, just froze me for a second. But then, the chilling reality hit. We heard it. Not just a splash, but the unmistakable sound of two people swimming, steadily, purposefully, towards our boat. The rhythm of their strokes, too close, too determined. Every stroke felt like a drumbeat echoing the mounting terror. Emerson screamed, a genuine, desperate yell that ripped through the quiet night, as a hand, dark and menacing, slick with water, reached up from behind the stern, trying to grab the railing. "They're on us," he shrieked. He had the anchor up by then, a heavy, barnacle-encrusted claw of metal, and I saw him, anchor in hand, muscles coiled, ready to use it as a weapon against whatever was trying to board us. He looked absolutely primal, ready to fight for his life. My instincts, buried under layers of 19-year-old complacency, finally kicked in. I didn't even think. I just gunned the engine. The old boat lurched forward with a sudden, violent roar, but in my panic, my hand shaking on the throttle, I misjudged the shallow water near the edge of the channel. We hit something, a loud crunch that vibrated through the entire hull, shaking us violently. We'd run aground on a sandbar, hard. The boat shuddered, stuck fast. My heart leaped into my throat. This is it, I thought, but I didn't stop. I slammed the throttle into reverse, the propeller churning madly, digging us off the bar with a gritty, tearing sound. With another lurch, we broke free. I swung the wheel, ramming the throttle forward again, and we peeled out of that bay at full speed, leaving a frothing wake behind us, heading for open water, for anything but them. We didn't say a word for what felt like an eternity, just white-knuckling it, the engine roaring, the salty night wind whipping past our faces. The air, once heavy with dread, now felt cold and exhilarating. Finally, out in the deeper channel, the lights of the distant shore faint smudges, we slowed down, the engine settling into a more even hum. The shared relief was palpable, a heavy sigh that lifted from both of us, a shiver running down my spine that had nothing to do with the cool air. Emerson turned to me, his eyes wide and still a little frantic, but with a definite glint of triumph, and just muttered, "I told you so." He didn't need to elaborate. Every word was in that look. And then, almost unbelievably, I made a stupid decision. As the adrenaline started to recede, we noticed some things had been knocked overboard when we hit the sandbar. My favorite hat, some empty cans that probably wouldn't float for long. "Let's just go back for them," I said, my voice still a little shaky, but tinged with that odd, almost foolish, sense of regaining control. Emerson, understandably, wasn't thrilled. "Are you kidding me?" he hissed. "We just escaped," but I convinced him, rationalizing it with some lame excuse about not wanting to litter, or maybe just that dumb, youthful need to prove nothing could really touch us. We turned back, cautiously, shining a small, weak flashlight on the water. That's when we saw them. Approaching boat lights. Fast. Not small fishing lights, but bright, powerful beams cutting through the darkness, bearing down on us with alarming speed. A full-blown high-speed chase ensued. Our old boat, bless its heart, was no match for their faster, sleeker vessel. They were gaining on us, the lights growing bigger, brighter, more menacing in our rear view, filling our small cockpit with their glare. The sound of their engine, a deep, powerful thrum, was like a predator's growl. Panic set in again, colder and sharper this time, because now we were on even terms, boat against boat. I remembered something my dad used to say about evading pursuit on the water, something about hugging the shoreline. "Stay shallow, they can't follow," he'd always told me. So I did it. I steered us as close to the land as I dared, weaving through shallower areas, past darkened docks, and around small, rocky outcroppings that would have ripped the bottom out of their larger boat. It worked. The pursuing boat, too large to risk running aground themselves, had to peel off, their lights swerving away into the deeper channel, slowly shrinking in our wake. We were free. Again, we made it back to the docks, heart still hammering, but now with a profound sense of relief. The old boat was miraculously undamaged, a testament to its sturdy build and maybe a touch of dumb luck. We spent the rest of the night, long after the initial terror subsided, huddled in Emerson's living room, theorizing. Were they robbers? Boat thieves? Looking to hijack a boat in the dark? Or something even more sinister? The motives were never clear, the faces never seen, but the intent felt undeniably malicious. A cold, predatory pursuit. That night, I learned a crucial, terrifying lesson about the vulnerability of being on open water at night, and the chilling truth that some dangers lurk not on land, not in the shadows of an alley, but where the dark water meets the unknown, where the vastness amplifies every whisper of fear. The lantern in the woods. The journey began without menace, the way such nights always do, with the weight of backpacks pressing against our shoulders and the sound of boots sinking into a bed of brittle leaves that crumbled beneath us. The October air was sharp enough to sting the lungs, yet carried a sweetness, the smell of pine and soil heavy with the memory of rain, and it filled the silence between us when conversation lagged. We told ourselves this trip was a final gift before the cold of winter locked these mountains in silence, though even then there was a strange pressure in the dusk, as if the forest knew we were intruders, and was already measuring how long we would last inside it. We made camp in a clearing where the trees arched back just enough to reveal a patch of bruised sky, the last red of the sun spilling like blood behind the ridges. The fire came quickly, flames stretching upward with hunger, and for a time its warmth shielded us from the immensity of the dark. Yet the further night descended, the heavier the silence became. It was the kind of silence that does not simply fill the gaps between sounds but presses into the body, weighing on the skin, pooling in the throat. Even the insects seemed to have withdrawn, leaving only the soft hiss of the fire and the occasional rustle of something unseen beyond the tree line. That was when the bell rang. Only once, metallic and distant, so faint it might have been a trick of the wind, yet so clear it cut through everything else. It hung in the air far longer than any note should have, as if vibrating not in the forest but inside my own skull. The others stirred, exchanging uneasy glances, but no one spoke for long. The fire became our excuse not to look outward. And yet, when I finally raised my eyes again, I saw it just beyond the trees, a faint glow, swaying gently at the height of a man's chest, pale yellow against the black. At first I thought it a reflection from the fire, then perhaps another camper's light, but the longer I watched, the less it seemed connected to anything human. It did not bob the way a lantern carried by a hand would. It floated, steady, patient, as though it had been waiting for us. The hours that followed dissolved in a haze of smoke and restless silence. Each time I looked away from the glow and then returned my gaze, it seemed closer, though I could never recall the moment of movement. It simply was nearer, as if the forest itself had bent around it. The others pretended not to notice, their voices too loud, their laughter too brittle, but the lantern drew us all in with the same inexorable pull. The more I tried to ignore it, the more I felt its rhythm echoing in my chest, as though my own breath had fallen into step with its gentle sway. When the bell rang again, it did not sound far away but unnervingly close, a single chime that seemed to rattle the teeth in my mouth. The glow thickened, painting the bark of nearby trees in a sickly hue, and I thought I saw movement within it, something shifting, leaning, then vanishing before I could hold its shape. The forest no longer felt like space around us, but like something alive, inhaling and exhaling in deep, slow pulses that made my skin crawl. Sleep, when it came, was not sleep at all but a shallow drift between waking and dream. The nylon of the tent walls glowed faintly with the reflection of that ever-present light. So close now I was certain if I pressed my hand against the fabric I would feel its warmth, or its chill. At some hour of the night, I opened my eyes to find that Tyler's tent was empty, the sleeping bag flattened, the boots gone. I thought of waking the others, but the weight in the air held me silent, as if the forest itself would notice and punish me for breaking its quiet. Then, through the trees, came his voice, steady, calm, wrong. "Over here," it called, neither panicked nor lost, but spoken with the hollow precision of something rehearsed. I rose before I understood what I was doing, drawn by the sound as much as by the glow that swayed deeper among the trunks. The air outside bit at my skin with a strange dampness, half cold and half warm, carrying a metallic scent that clung to the back of my throat. Sam and Lily emerged behind me, their faces pale, eyes glassy, as though we were all moving in a shared dream that no one could resist. We followed the light not out of choice but out of a compulsion too heavy to deny. The forest unfolded differently than it had before. The path twisted in directions that did not exist during daylight, and the trees leaned closer, their branches clawing against one another as though whispering. Each step seemed to echo longer than it should have, as though the ground beneath us was hollow. The lantern pulsed ahead, dimming and brightening with a rhythm that matched the thudding of my own heart, and with every swell I felt the earth tilt, as though gravity itself were bending toward it. The voice came again, closer now, yet everywhere at once, from the left and from the right, above and behind. Over here. The words carried no urgency, no fear, no trace of the Tyler we knew, only that same steady tone that made me wonder if we were hearing him at all or merely something that wore his voice. I caught fleeting glimpses of pale shapes shifting between the trees, too quick to hold in focus, as if the darkness itself were forming faces and erasing them again. Sam's hand hovered at his side, fingers brushing the handle of the knife he carried, but even that gesture looked slow, almost ceremonial, as if the decision to defend himself had been drained of meaning. Lily walked as if in trance, her eyes fixed on the swaying glow. None of us spoke aloud, because the moment words touched the air they would be swallowed, and I think we all feared that if we broke the silence the forest would answer. And then the bell rang once more, louder than before, vibrating through marrow and breath, and in that trembling note I saw Tyler's figure step into the circle of light. His face was not his face, not truly, but a mask of stillness stretched too tight, his eyes wide and shining, his mouth moving in silence while the lantern's glow flared around him like a wound opening in the night. For a long time I could not decide if what I saw standing there was truly Tyler or some distorted echo of him that the woods had borrowed. The faint glow of the lantern painted his face with a sickly yellow pallor, smoothing away every familiar feature until he looked both recognizable and impossibly wrong. His eyes were too still, too wide, as if the lids had forgotten to blink, and the expression on his mouth was not a smile and not a frown, but something caught between, an unfinished thought, frozen into flesh. I tried to whisper his name, but the word caught in my throat and broke into silence, and in that silence the forest seemed to lean closer, listening with the patience of something that has waited centuries. My vision blurred at the edges, perhaps from exhaustion or perhaps from whatever strange rhythm pulsed in the earth beneath my boots, and for a moment I felt certain I was drifting in and out of a dream. The trees no longer stood where they had before. They swayed like tall figures, shifting in place, stepping forward and back, closing a circle around us, in a slow and deliberate motion. The lantern swayed with them. Its glow thickened the air until every breath felt heavy, metallic, and damp. When I inhaled, it was as though I was swallowing smoke, and when I exhaled, I wondered if the forest was breathing with me, or if it was simply inhaling my breath for itself. Lily clutched my arm but said nothing. Her grip was tight, desperate, and yet she seemed half asleep, eyes glassy as though staring into some private vision only she could see. Sam, too, stood motionless, knife lowered to his side, head tilted just slightly as if listening to a story no one else could hear. The bell chimed again, not once this time, but 3 times, soft and slow, and with each note the air seemed to fold inward. My knees trembled. I thought of childhood dreams in which the world tilted and I floated just an inch above my own body, unable to tell if I was asleep or awake. That was how this felt now. The forest did not look solid anymore. The trunks stretched too far upward, the sky pressed down too low, and the ground beneath my boots shifted like sand. Tyler, or the figure that wore him, lifted one hand. It was not a beckoning gesture, not quite, but more of a motion of release, like someone opening a door or drawing back a curtain. I remember thinking that if I stepped forward, I would not be walking into trees, but into something else entirely, a place where sound and time did not move the way I knew them. The temptation was there, heavy and insistent. My legs wanted to obey. I closed my eyes, hoping that when I opened them again, the lantern would be gone, that the forest would be as it had been before, just cold and dark and silent. But when I opened them, the glow was brighter, closer, and Tyler's face was inches from mine. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Instead, the bell tolled inside my head, filling me until I felt it vibrating in my teeth and behind my eyes. I stumbled backward, dizzy, and for a moment I could not tell if I was falling or floating. When my vision cleared, the clearing had changed. Sam was gone. Only Lily remained, standing at the edge of the lantern's circle of light, her arms limp at her sides, her expression vacant, as though sleepwalking. I called her name, but the sound came out muffled, like a voice underwater. She did not turn. She did not blink. The lantern swayed once, twice, and then the forest closed in again, and for the first time I truly understood that I might not wake from this night at all. The forest shifted with a suddenness that felt like waking from a long, uneasy dream. One moment Lily was standing at the edge of the glow, her body slack as though cradled by some unseen lullaby, and the next she snapped her head toward me with a sharp, jerking motion, eyes wide and gleaming with a light that did not belong to her. The lantern flared at the same time, its glow swelling into a harsh, blinding brightness, and in that instant I saw them figures between the trees, dozens, maybe more, tall and crooked, with outlines that refused to stay still. They looked like people and not people, tree shadows that had learned to walk, their faces pale and smooth as bark stripped of life. The sound came next, the bell striking again and again, no longer slow but feverish, a tolling that rattled the air and sent a vibration deep into my chest. It was so loud I thought my ribs would crack, and yet I knew it was not a sound anyone outside this clearing could ever hear. It was for us. It was always for us. Lily moved first. She stepped into the circle of light as though she had been summoned, her body rigid, her mouth moving soundlessly in time with the chimes. I reached for her, but the moment my hand brushed her sleeve, I felt a cold so deep it was like plunging into winter water, numbing me to the bone, and she slipped from my grasp as if she weighed nothing at all. She didn't fight, didn't scream, just walked calmly toward the lantern, and when she reached it, she did not stop. She passed straight through the glow, her outline flickering, thinning, and then she was gone. That was when panic truly took me. Every instinct that had been muffled by exhaustion and disbelief tore itself awake and screamed at me to run. My feet obeyed before my mind could catch up, crashing through leaves and snapping branches, the forest whipping at my arms and face. Behind me the bell clanged on, frantic and merciless, and with every strike I felt the ground tilt beneath me, as though the forest were trying to pull me back. I called for Sam even though I knew he was gone. I called for Tyler though I knew it wasn't him anymore. Their names cracked in my throat, useless against the thundering of the bell. All I could do was run, and even as I ran, the trees did not lead me where they should. The trail was lost to me. The stars above blurred and twisted, refusing to mark a path. The forest was folding in on itself, endless and repeating, and always ahead. Through the tangle of branches, the lantern glowed. No matter how I turned, no matter how I fought to push deeper into the dark, it was always there, swaying gently, patient as death. My lungs burned, my legs gave out beneath me, and I stumbled into a hollow between the roots of a massive oak, chest heaving, sweat and cold mingling until I no longer knew if I was burning or freezing. For a moment there was silence. My ears rang with it. I thought, perhaps foolishly, that the nightmare had ended, that the lantern had chosen the others and left me behind. But then the bell struck once more, low and final, a sound like earth splitting. The glow swelled until it filled the clearing, until there was no night and no forest, only a wall of gold light that pulsed like a living thing. And within it, just at the edge of vision, I saw them again, the figures, the watchers, the hollow-eyed shapes that had stood in the trees. They stepped forward in unison, and their faces leaned toward me, smooth and blank, as if waiting for me to surrender and take my place among them. I think I screamed, or maybe I only thought I did, and then the world broke open. When the world broke open, I thought I would fall into nothingness, but instead I found myself staggering out of the tree line into the faint gray of dawn. The forest that had moments ago pressed in on me with its choking glow was quiet again, unremarkable, almost serene. The air was cool, thin, and smelled of wet leaves and moss. Birds were calling. A creek murmured. The ordinary sounds of morning returned as if the night had never happened. For a while I simply stood there trembling, my boots sinking into damp soil, waiting for the forest to lunge again and swallow me whole. When it didn't, I forced my legs to move, stumbling down a slope that eventually met the faint trace of a trail. The trail looked familiar. though I had no memory of finding it. By the time the sun lifted above the ridge, I was back near the ranger's station where our car was parked. It should have been relief. It should have felt like escape. But the silence of that empty parking lot made my skin crawl, because 3 spaces should have been filled and only 1 car remained. The tents, the bags, everything we had carried up with us gone, as though erased. I drove. I don't remember how far, only that the road stretched endlessly and the trees lined it in a blur. And with every mile I told myself it was over, that I was safe, that I had survived. But even then, out of the corner of my eye, there was always a glow between the trunks, always a suggestion of swaying light. In the weeks that followed, I tried to explain, at first to myself, then to others. Rangers, police, even Sam's parents when they called, desperate, asking if I knew where he had gone. I told them about the lantern, about the bell, about how the forest breathed. I told them everything. Their eyes softened with pity, and I knew what they thought. That shock had scrambled my memory. That trauma had bent it into hallucination. Maybe they're right. Maybe. But some nights, when sleep finally threatens to take me, I hear it again. A single chime. Metallic. Final. And when I open my eyes, the room is dark, yet not fully. There's always a faint shimmer at the far corner, swaying gently, patient as ever. I close my eyes tight, convincing myself it's nothing, just headlights outside or some trick of nerves. But deep down I know the truth. The lantern doesn't stay in the woods. It follows, and sooner or later, when I'm too tired to resist, I'll step into its light, just like the others. The voice on the baby monitor. The house was nothing extraordinary. A plain suburban rental at the edge of a cul-de-sac where the lawns were trimmed too neatly and the air smelled faintly of gasoline and cut grass. But for us, it was enough. A place to breathe, a place to start again. The boxes had barely been unpacked when we brought the crib into the small upstairs bedroom, the one painted pale yellow, with sunlight pooling on the carpet in the afternoons. It felt safe, and that was all we wanted, safety and quiet. We bought the baby monitor the way most new parents do, half from caution, half from fear, that subtle paranoia that comes with sleepless nights. The device was modern, sleek, with a small camera perched like a black eye on the nursery wall, and a receiver that sat on the nightstand beside our bed. At first it was just reassurance, a soft hiss of white noise, the occasional shuffle when our daughter turned in her sleep, a faint cough or whimper that carried into our room like a distant reminder that she was still there, still ours, still safe. But the first time we heard the lullaby, the world shifted. It was late, past midnight, the kind of hour when the body is too tired to question what the ear insists it has heard. At first it was only a faint melody, broken by static, rising from the receiver like the echo of a forgotten song. The tune was simple, childlike, sung in a voice too low to belong to a child and too smooth to belong to any voice we knew. It curled into the room like smoke, thin and persistent, wrapping itself around our half-sleep. We lay frozen, listening, waiting for it to fade, but the melody only grew clearer, shaping itself into words we could not fully catch. Syllables stretched and softened as though the singer's mouth was pressed close to the microphone, whispering directly into the device. The camera showed nothing unusual. The crib, the small figure of our daughter curled into sleep, her chest rising and falling with the slow rhythm of dreams. No one else, nothing out of place. And yet the song continued, patient, endless. For days afterward, I convinced myself it had been interference. Baby monitors are vulnerable to such things. They pick up stray signals, bleed voices from passing radios or nearby devices. That is what I told myself. That is what any rational person would believe. But rational belief is fragile when tested in the dark. The second time it happened, the song was clearer, and with it came words. My daughter's name, spoken slowly, softly, with the same tender cadence we used when soothing her. The syllables repeated, over and over, until they no longer sounded like a name at all, but like a chant, a sound eroded of meaning by endless repetition. I rose, compelled, and went to the nursery. The air inside was cold, unnaturally so, the kind of chill that belongs to basements or to winter nights with the windows thrown wide. Yet the window was shut, the curtains drawn. She slept peacefully, untouched. But in the corner, where the rocking chair sat, the air seemed heavier, as though pressed by a presence just beyond sight. When I returned to our room, the monitor still played whispers. The camera, angled at the crib, now displayed a faint shimmer in the corner, a distortion of light and shadow shaped like a figure half-seated, half leaning forward. It was not distinct enough to be a person, not vague enough to dismiss as a glitch. It was in between, that terrible threshold where the mind recognizes something without being able to name it. The rocking chair moved once, slow, deliberate, the faintest creak carried through the device. Our daughter never stirred. Time blurred in the days that followed. We told no one, because how could you tell a story like this without sounding fragile, unmoored? Instead, we tried to bury it in routine. The diapers, the bottles, the endless cycles of sleep and waking that defined new parenthood. But each night the monitor drew us back. Some nights it was only static, sharp and loud, filling the house with the sound of a storm contained inside a single speaker. Other nights the lullaby returned, warped and too slow, as if the singer had all the time in the world. And sometimes, rarely but unmistakably, the voice would speak again. It did not call for us. It did not ask. It simply named her, as if reminding us of what belonged to it, not to us. The sound never came when we were in the nursery, only when we were elsewhere. Far enough that distance became doubt. I began to dream of the voice. Dreams in which I stood at the nursery door and saw a figure seated in the rocking chair, its face obscured by the same static that filled the monitor, a blur of shifting lines that pulsed with every word. The figure would rock slowly, cradling something in its arms, and though I could not see what it held, I always woke with the certainty that it was not my child but something else entirely, something it wanted me to mistake for her. The dreams bled into waking. I found myself pausing at the top of the stairs, listening for faint music that might not have been there. I would glance at mirrors and see the shape of a rocking chair behind me, though the nursery door was closed. My wife confessed, in a whisper one morning, that she too had begun to hum the lullaby in her sleep without realizing it. The final night came quietly, with rain pressing against the windows and thunder low in the distance. We sat awake, staring at the monitor, waiting. For hours there was only silence, until at last the voice returned. Not with the lullaby this time, but with a sound that made my skin crawl. It was our daughter. Her tiny form lay still in the crib, but through the monitor came the unmistakable sound of her voice, too clear, too steady, humming the very same lullaby we had never taught her. The camera showed her asleep, her mouth unmoving, yet the sound persisted, weaving through the static like a second breath. The figure in the corner seemed sharper now, less a shimmer and more a shape, leaning closer to the crib as if to listen. I wanted to run to her, to tear open the door and snatch her away from that room, but my body refused. The air in the hallway had grown thick, heavy with the same cold that pressed in on the nursery, and with every step I took the weight grew worse, as if the house itself was holding me back. I reached the door at last, my hand on the knob, the monitor still in my other hand, and I heard the lullaby falter, stumble, then stop. The silence that followed was worse than the song. When I pushed the door open, the crib was empty. Only the rocking chair moved, swaying back and forth with a rhythm too steady to be natural, too measured to be the work of air or gravity. And in the monitor's tiny screen, for the briefest moment before it went dark, I saw her face reflected in the glass, not in the crib, not in my arms, but staring back from the black lens of the camera, humming softly, patiently, waiting for me to listen. The room remained empty, though the rocking chair swayed gently, as if someone had only just left it, the wood creaking in slow complaint. I stood frozen at the threshold, the monitor still in my hand, its screen now black, though I swore I could hear a faint trace of humming still trapped in its speaker. The air pressed on me, heavy, damp, filled with the smell of dust and old fabric, as though the house itself had aged in the span of a breath. I reached for the crib, for the place where she should have been, but my hands met only the indent of her small weight in the mattress. The warmth of a body just lifted away. The thunder outside rolled once, twice, then faded. The silence it left behind was immense, a silence that felt watched. I searched every corner of that room, pulling open the closet, tearing back the curtains, pressing my palms flat against the walls as though I might find a hidden door. But the house remained as it always had been, ordinary and small, a fragile skeleton of plaster and wood, ordinary except for the absence, except for the sense that something had been traded in the night. When I staggered back to our bedroom, my wife was sitting upright, her eyes glazed as if she had been watching something only she could see. She turned to me slowly, lips parting, and I thought she might scream or demand answers, but instead she whispered in a voice not her own, "She is only sleeping." Then her eyes closed and she fell against the pillow, leaving me alone with the weight of that sentence. I don't remember the rest of that night. Memory blurs, edges smudge into one another. Time skips forward and back. I recall standing at the top of the stairs, convinced I could hear the lullaby drifting upward from the first floor, though every light below was off. I recall glancing into the bathroom mirror and seeing behind me not the hallway but the nursery, the rocking chair swaying, the crib empty. I recall closing my eyes to banish the image, only to find myself inside it when I opened them again. Whether I slept at all, I cannot say, but dawn eventually broke, pale and cold, leaking through the blinds with no warmth. Our daughter was in her crib again, as though she had never been gone. She stirred, yawned, reached for me, perfectly ordinary, perfectly alive. My wife woke with no memory of the words she had spoken. The monitor sat dark on the nightstand, its screen blank, its speaker silent, and yet I knew the night had not been a dream. In the days that followed, I carried on as best I could, though every hour felt stretched thin, every minute shadowed. The monitor remained off, yet I could not bring myself to remove it. It stood there like an eye closed in sleep, waiting to open. At times, walking past the nursery, I thought I heard the faint crackle of static even though the device was unplugged, a phantom hiss that cut off the moment I turned my head. Sleep became a stranger. When it came in fragments, and in those fragments the dreams unfurled, always the same. I walked into the nursery and found not one crib but dozens, row upon row, filling the small room until the walls bowed outward to contain them. In each crib a child slept, yet none of them were mine, and when I leaned close to see their faces, they shifted into the blur of static, a smear of lines that pulsed with the rhythm of the lullaby. Somewhere among them I would hear her name, whispered over and over, and though I searched the rows, I never found her. I woke from those dreams with the taste of iron in my mouth and the certainty that someone had been watching me while I slept. My wife, too, grew pale and restless. Once I caught her standing in the nursery at 3 a.m, swaying gently as though she herself were the chair, humming under her breath with her eyes closed. She did not wake when I touched her shoulder. She only stopped when the first thin light of dawn crept across the carpet. The house began to change. At first it was subtle, the sound of the pipes groaning though no water ran, the windows misting from within while the night outside was clear. Then it was less subtle, doors ajar in the morning that had been shut at night, the smell of dust and mildew so strong it woke us from shallow sleep, the chair rocking on its own as though nudged by an unseen hand. And through it all, our daughter slept soundly, undisturbed, as if sheltered by the very presence that threatened us. We tried leaving. Once, in desperation, we drove to her mother's house across town, staying there for 3 nights. The monitor remained packed away in a box in the trunk of the car. Yet on the second night, the lullaby found us again, faint at first, then growing stronger, seeping into the silence of that unfamiliar bedroom. My wife woke before me, standing at the crib's edge, her lips moving with the tune as though repeating what only she could hear. When I shook her, she blinked in confusion, denying any memory of it. On the third morning, the box that held the monitor was found open, its contents scattered on the floor, though no one admitted to touching it. We returned home by evening, defeated, as though some invisible tether had pulled us back. From then on, the house seemed to breathe with us. The air carried a rhythm, slow and deep, like lungs expanding and contracting around us. At times I would stand still and listen, and I swear I could hear it inhale when I exhaled, exhale when I inhaled, as if we were no longer separate. The walls felt porous, thin, and behind them I imagined another house, layered atop ours, a place where the rocking never stopped and the song never ended, and perhaps we had only stepped into its echo. The last entry in my memory is fractured, but I will tell it as clearly as I can. It was a night without weather, without sound, the air still and heavy. I woke to the monitor glowing, though I had not turned it on, its screen lit with a pale shimmer. I picked it up and saw the nursery, the crib, the faint outline of my daughter curled inside it. Relief washed through me until I noticed the chair. Someone sat in it. The figure was clear now, no longer static or suggestion, but a presence solid and undeniable. It rocked slowly, cradling something in its arms, and though the monitor's angle was fixed, I knew it turned to face me. The lullaby began, soft and patient, filling the room as though sung directly into my ear. My daughter stirred, lifted her head, and in the monitor's screen I saw her tiny mouth moving, humming in unison with the figure that held her reflection. I do not know if I entered the nursery or if I only dreamed I did. I remember the door opening, the air cold, the chair swaying. I remember reaching for her, my hands trembling, and finding only emptiness, as though she had never been there. And I remember the voice, hers, theirs, whispering together, low and endless. She is only sleeping. When I woke, if waking is the right word, the sun was rising, the monitor was dark, and the house was silent once more. She was in her crib, breathing softly, untouched. My wife lay beside me as if she had not moved all night. And yet I know the truth, that there are nights when I close my eyes and see her reflection not in glass, not in the camera, but standing at the foot of my bed, humming a lullaby we never taught her, waiting for the day when we will finally listen long enough to understand the words, because she is only sleeping, and someday she will wake. The motel room that wasn't there. The highway at night is its own kind of wilderness. Long stretches without light, only the steady rhythm of white lines flicking past and the soft hum of tires against asphalt. I had been driving for hours, the kind of drive where time slips sideways and you forget which state you're in, only that the miles keep folding under you. My eyes burned from fatigue. My hands felt numb against the steering wheel, and all I wanted was a place to stop. When I finally saw the neon sign half lit, buzzing faintly in the humid air, it felt like salvation. Red Pines Motel. The letters spelled, though the P flickered in and out, leaving red lines more often than not. The building crouched low against the dark. A line of doors painted a dull green, each one illuminated by a sickly yellow bulb. An empty parking lot stretched before it, asphalt cracked and patched with weeds. I pulled in without hesitation, too tired to question the unease that prickled at the edges of my mind. The clerk inside the small office barely looked up as I entered. He slid a ledger across the counter, his hands pale, his nails short and clean, the kind of detail you notice only when your brain is fogged by exhaustion. I signed without reading. He handed me a key on a heavy brass ring, the number stamped into it, room 6. The door creaked as I opened it, revealing a room that smelled faintly of mildew and old smoke, the kind of odor that clings to fabric long after the source is gone. The wallpaper was faded, yellowed in places, peeling at the seams. A single bed sagged in the center, its quilt patterned with a design that might once have been flowers but now resembled stains. A lamp on the nightstand cast a dim circle of light, too weak to banish the shadows at the edges of the room. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed without ceremony. Sleep came almost instantly, though it was not the clean, dreamless sleep of relief, but something fractured. I dreamed of footsteps pacing just outside the door, slow and deliberate. I dreamed of knocking that never came but left the wood trembling as though struck. At one point I thought I heard someone breathing against the thin wall, inhaling and exhaling in perfect time with me. When I woke, the room was darker than before, as if the lamp had burned itself out. My watch read 2:17 a.m. A sound echoed through the silence, a pounding, frantic, desperate. It came from the hallway. I stumbled to the door, pulled it open, and found a man standing there, his face gray with panic. His eyes locked on mine, and he shouted words that should have jolted me fully awake, but instead sank into me like a slow poison. "Get out. This room is not supposed to be used." Before I could answer, he was gone. The hallway stretched empty in both directions, the carpet threadbare, the wallpaper patterned with shapes that seemed to shift as I stared. I stepped out, looked both ways, but there was no sign of him, no echo of his footsteps, only silence. I turned back to the door, and for the first time noticed the number. The brass plaque was tarnished, the edges worn, but the number was not 6. It was nothing, a blank space where the digits had been. The hallway itself no longer seemed right. The light fixtures were different, older, casting a dim orange glow. The wallpaper, where it peeled, revealed not plaster but wood beneath, charred and blackened, as if scorched long ago. The air smelled of soot and something older, heavier, a scent that clung to memory more than the nose. I told myself I was dreaming, still half asleep, caught in some elaborate hallucination brought on by exhaustion. Yet when I pressed my hand against the wall, the heat of it burned my palm, and the pain was too real to deny. I backed away, my breath ragged, and when I turned, the door had closed behind me. The key in my pocket felt heavy, impossibly heavy, as though it did not belong to me. I wandered the hallway, searching for the office, for any sign of the world outside. But the hall stretched too far, bending at angles that had not existed when I entered. Doors lined the walls, each painted the same dull green, but their numbers were wrong. Doubled, inverted, mirrored, some scratched away entirely. I passed room 1 twice, though I had walked only in one direction. I passed room 3 times, each door slightly different, one with a knob too low, one with a frame too narrow, and then I heard it, a faint crackle, like static, seeping from behind one of the doors. I pressed my ear against the wood and froze. From inside came the sound of a baby's lullaby, soft, distorted, carried on the hiss of some unseen device. The melody was familiar, though I could not place it, and it carried with it the same weight of wrongness as the voice of the man who had warned me. At some point, I must have collapsed. Whether I fainted or simply fell back into sleep, I cannot say. But when I opened my eyes, I was once again lying on the sagging bed, the lamp buzzing faintly beside me. Morning light leaked through the thin curtains, pale and cold. For a moment I convinced myself it had all been a dream, some fever of the night, until I noticed the key on the nightstand. The number had changed. No longer 6, no longer blank. The metal had warped, letters etched into it that had not been there before. It now read, vacant. I left without checking out, without speaking to the clerk. The parking lot was empty, the sign above the building dark and unlit. When I passed it later that day, returning along the highway out of doubt, I found nothing but a foundation overgrown with weeds and charred stone steps leading up to air. Locals would later tell me the place had burned decades ago, taking half a dozen guests with it, most in their sleep, room 6 among them. And sometimes, when the road stretches too long and the night grows too heavy, I think back to the pounding on the door, the warning shouted by a man who vanished, and I wonder if the room had ever released me at all, or if I am still there, dreaming in smoke, waiting for the fire to reach me. When I left the motel that morning, the road seemed to stretch endlessly, every mile marker too far from the last, every bend repeating the same clusters of pines and rust-colored billboards. The sun rose, but the light remained pale, as though filtered through a film of ash. My eyes scanned every gas station, every sign of town, but each one I passed looked abandoned, peeling paint on locked doors, windows layered with dust. It was as though I had slipped into some neglected version of the highway that had been left behind when the world moved on. I pulled into a diner just outside a town whose name I could not pronounce. Inside, the booths were cracked vinyl, the air heavy with the scent of stale coffee. An old man sat at the counter, hunched, his hands trembling around a mug. When I asked about the Red Pines Motel, his gaze flicked toward me with something between recognition and warning. His voice rasped like dry leaves. That place hasn't stood for 40 years. You must have pulled off at the wrong exit. But when I pressed him, asking about room 6, his hand tightened on the mug until it cracked. He said nothing more, only stared at me until I left. I should have driven on, left the memory behind like a patch of fog burned off by the sun. Instead, I turned back that evening, drawn by something I could not name. The motel was there again, crouched against the dark, its sign flickering, the P in Red Pines stuttering in and out. The parking lot was empty. The clerk sat behind the desk, as though no time had passed. When I entered, he slid the ledger toward me with the same slow gesture, and I saw my name already written there. The ink dried, the page yellowed. The key was the same too. Brass, heavy, the number stamped. Room 6. This time I did not want to open the door, but my hand obeyed. Inside, the room was different. The wallpaper now intact, bright with patterns of flowers, the bed freshly made, a faint radio playing somewhere beyond the wall. For a moment it felt as though I had stepped not into a ruin but into the past. And when I glanced at the nightstand, the newspaper there was dated the 14th of July, 1973. I was not alone. I heard voices in the hallway, laughter, the clatter of shoes against linoleum. When I opened the door, a woman passed by in a dress too dated for the present, her hair piled high, a cigarette in hand. She did not look at me. A child ran after her, giggling, and disappeared around the corner. I followed, but the hallway turned again, and when I came back, the numbers on the doors had changed. Some marked with symbols instead of digits, some without any at all. The guests did not see me, or perhaps they did, but mistook me for one of their own. Their faces were pale, blurred at the edges, as though fading from photographs left too long in the sun. I wanted to ask them where I was, what had happened, but my voice seemed swallowed by the walls. And always, at the end of the corridor, room 6 waited. That night, I dreamed of flames. Or perhaps it was not a dream. The wallpaper curled and blackened. The air filled with smoke so dense it choked me. I stumbled through the hallway. Doors locked, each knob burning hot against my palms. Voices screamed in rooms I could not reach. The floor groaned beneath me, splitting, spilling embers upward. I clawed my way back toward room 6, but when I pushed the door open, it led not to the room but to the parking lot, dawn spilling across cracked asphalt. My car waited, key still in the ignition. Behind me, the building smoldered, flames licking at its roof, the signs sputtering and dying in the smoke. I drove without looking back. Weeks later, at home, I searched for records. Old newspapers told of a fire at the Red Pines Motel in 1973. The blaze had started in room 6, spreading so fast the building was consumed before help arrived. 6 guests perished, though the reports disagreed on their names. Some articles listed families, others listed strangers. In one clipping, too faded to read in full, my own surname appeared among them. I stopped sleeping well after that. Some nights I wake convinced I am still there, that my apartment walls are only a trick, that when I open the door it will be the green paint of the motel, the brass number of room 6 staring back at me. On those nights, the air tastes faintly of smoke, and sometimes as I drift in and out of uneasy dreams, I hear it, the frantic pounding of a fist on the door, the voice shouting, "Get out, this room is not supposed to be used." I never know if it's a warning meant to save me, or if it's my own voice echoing back across the years, still trapped, still burning, calling from inside the fire. The mirror at the estate sale. It began with something ordinary, which is always how such things begin. The estate sale was quiet, a slow Sunday morning in late September when the air already carried the faint chill of approaching autumn. The house was large, though not grand, the kind of place built in the 1922nd with high ceilings and creaking floorboards, its rooms half emptied by strangers wandering with coffee cups in hand, scanning the remnants of another life. I had not meant to stop. I was driving home, saw the sign posted at the intersection, estate sale. Everything must go, and turned without thinking. Inside, there were tables cluttered with dishes, stacks of yellowed books, lamps missing their shades. It smelled faintly of dust and old fabric, that scent of abandonment that clings to spaces once lived in. And then I saw the mirror. It leaned against the wall of the back parlor, taller than me, framed in dark wood carved with intricate swirls. The glass was old, not the clean surface of modern mirrors, but something softer, a little clouded, as if it remembered too much. It drew me without effort, as though it had been waiting for me specifically. My reflection looked thinner in it, my face more tired, the hollows beneath my eyes deeper. But there was something else, something behind me. I thought at first it was only the distortion of old glass, a trick of light. The room reflected wider than it should have been, the windows stretching too tall, the ceiling arching higher, and there, in the far distance of the reflection, was a door that did not exist. I bought it. Of course I did. How could I not, when the price was so low, when the woman at the sale seemed almost eager for me to take it? She helped me carry it to my car, though she never met my eyes. And when I asked about its history, she only shook her head and muttered, "It was here when we moved in. Always here." In my own house, the mirror seemed larger, heavier, as though it had grown on the ride home. I set it in the living room, against the far wall. All that evening I caught myself glancing at it, not out of vanity, but from a compulsion that felt deeper. The glass seemed darker at night, swallowing more of the room than it gave back. My reflection lingered half a heartbeat too long after I moved, as though the glass remembered me for a moment before letting go. That night I dreamed of the parlor again, though it was no longer abandoned. The mirror stood at the center, and through it I saw not myself but a hall of endless doors, each one slightly ajar. Something moved beyond them. Not people exactly, but shapes, shifting in the half-dark, waiting. I woke at 3:03 a.m., the numbers bright on the clock beside me. From the living room came the faint sound of wood groaning, as though something heavy had shifted its weight. In daylight, the mirror seemed harmless, though I began to notice small differences. A picture frame behind me hung slightly crooked in the reflection, though it was straight on the wall. A lamp appeared dimmer, its bulb sputtering in the glass, though steady in reality. And always, faint but certain, there was that extra door in the reflected room. I began to test it. Standing before the mirror, I would lift my hand quickly, wave, turn. My reflection followed, but a fraction too late. Once, when I leaned close, I swore I saw its mouth twitch into a smile, though mine had not. Nights grew worse. I would wake with the certainty of footsteps in the living room, the boards creaking in slow, deliberate rhythm. Each time I went to look, the house was empty, but the mirror seemed warm to the touch, as if something had pressed against it from the other side. And then one night I woke to find myself standing in front of it. I did not remember leaving my bed. The glass shimmered faintly, the room behind my reflection stretching wider, deeper, the distant door standing open now. Something waited in that opening, tall, still, featureless. My reflection turned toward it while I remained facing forward. I woke again in bed, my heart racing, my palms damp with sweat, but the soles of my feet were black with dust, as though I had been walking across the old parlor's floor. It was not long before the whispering began. At first it came faintly, when the house was still, a sound like fabric brushing against fabric, too low to form words. But as the nights passed, the whisper shaped itself into syllables. My name, drawn out slowly, spoken not by one voice but by many, overlapping, as though the mirror remembered every mouth that had ever leaned close to it and was speaking them all at once. I tried covering it with a sheet, but in the morning the fabric was crumpled on the floor, the mirror bare again. I tried moving it to the garage, but no matter how I angled it, it seemed always to face inward, its dark surface pulling me back, and the reflection changed. The door was wider now, the figure nearer, though each time I blinked it seemed to retreat, waiting for me to look away. The worst was the night I caught my reflection watching me, not mirroring me watching. Its eyes tracked me across the room, its head turning slightly, though mine did not. When I froze, it smiled. I went back to the estate, hoping for answers. The house was empty now, the sale finished, the rooms bare. A neighbor watering her lawn told me the family had moved out. Quickly, almost overnight. She could not say why, only that no one stayed long in that house, that tenants came and went, leaving furniture behind more often than they carried it away. In the county records, I found mention of the address dating back a century, but the owners' names changed too often, with too little time between. People sold quickly, sometimes after only months. In one article from the 1952nd, a family of 4 vanished entirely. The only possession noted in the police report was a mirror, described in detail down to the carvings in the frame. I told myself I would move it out, leave it behind, but each time I tried, something stopped me. The weight of it was unbearable, the glass humming faintly beneath my hands. On the last night I sat before it, watching as the reflection darkened until the room around me vanished, leaving only that endless hall of doors. One by one they opened. Shadows moved between them, whispering, beckoning. My reflection stepped forward, though I remained still, its hands stretching toward the open door. I felt the pull, a gravity deeper than any dream, and before I knew it, my body was moving, leaning closer, my breath fogging the glass. The surface no longer felt solid. It rippled like water. The last thing I remember is the sensation of falling inward, of the mirror swallowing me whole. Morning came. Neighbors say my house was quiet, the mirror still leaning against the wall of the living room, its glass clear, its frame cold. They say the reflection showed only an empty room. But sometimes when visitors stand too close, they swear they see a figure in the distance, blurred, waving faintly, as though from the other side of a long hallway. And if they lean closer, they might hear a whisper rising from the glass, overlapping voices calling a name that sounds almost like their own. Sleep became fractured, though I could never be certain if I was sleeping at all. The mirror began to appear in my dreams, though not as an object, not as furniture in a room, but as a place I walked into. Its surface stretched wider the closer I approached, until the frame was no longer wood but stone, an archway leading into a corridor that seemed to pulse with its own faint breath. Along the corridor hung mirrors of every shape, each one dimly lit, each one holding faces I half recognized. Some were friends long gone, others strangers, but a few, God help me, a few were versions of myself, thinner, older, broken in ways I did not want to imagine. They moved independently, not mirroring me, but living out their own small torments. One clawed at the glass from within, one sobbed silently, one stood utterly still with eyes too wide. The corridor had no end. Every step revealed more doors, more glass, more faces, and always behind me, a whisper urging me not to look back. I woke one evening to the sound of my own voice. Not my wife, not the television, but me speaking softly from the living room. I rose, trembling, and found myself staring at the mirror. My reflection stood there, lips moving, though mine did not. The sound came through the glass, muffled, as though recorded and played back on some warped tape. I leaned closer. My reflection smiled. It stepped backward into the widening hallway of its world, while I remained in mine. And then, for the briefest second, another figure stood beside it, tall, blurred, its arm resting on my double's shoulder in a gesture too familiar, as if they had known each other a long time. The surface rippled when I touched it. My fingers left no mark, but I swear I felt skin on the other side brush against mine. I tried to fight it. I tried to banish it the way one might banish an obsession, by ignoring it, by refusing to feed it attention. I moved the mirror into the basement, covered it, locked the door. For days the house was silent, but then the changes began. At first the hallway seemed longer. The rooms felt tilted, ceilings higher, windows narrower. When I passed a dark pane of glass car windows, storefronts, I thought I saw that extra door waiting faintly in the reflection. One night, coming home late, I opened my own front door and stepped into not my living room but the parlor of the estate sale house. Abandoned, stripped bare, dust thick on the air. The mirror leaned in the same corner, uncovered, patient. I turned, panicked, fled outside only to find my own neighborhood waiting. But when I looked back, my house seemed older, its paint cracked, its windows boarded. The world no longer felt anchored. Every surface was a potential threshold, every reflection a chance for the door to widen. The whispers grew louder. They were not calling just my name anymore, but reciting words I had once spoken, conversations with my mother, arguments with old friends, laughter I had long forgotten. The mirror was storing me, piece by piece, an archive of everything I had been, a library of memory spoken back in 100 overlapping voices. And sometimes, when I leaned close, I could see them, people I knew had never owned this mirror, people who had lived and died far before me. Their lives played out like flickering reels. A woman brushing her hair in 1910, a child clutching a wooden toy in 1945, a man in 1973 pressing his hands desperately against the glass as flames lit the room behind him. Each of them trapped, each of them remembered by the mirror. It was not merely a reflection, it was a container. On the final night, I awoke standing once more before the mirror, though I had no memory of rising from bed. My reflection no longer copied me. It beckoned. Behind it, the corridor was crowded now, faces pressed close to the glass of their own frames, watching, waiting. The door in the distance was wide open. A light pulsed beyond it, soft and golden, like dawn through sheer curtains. I felt the pull again, a longing, not just to look, but to step forward, to be absorbed, to join the archive of voices so that I would no longer be alone in this watching. My hand touched the glass. It was no longer cold but warm, almost feverish, like the skin of someone alive. And for a moment, I thought I heard my wife calling me back from the bedroom, but her voice was drowned out by the chorus inside the mirror, rising, insistent, 100 versions of myself whispering in unison, "Come home." And the surface rippled, and I leaned forward. The next morning, the mirror stood silent in the living room, its frame dull, its glass ordinary. My wife says she found me asleep on the couch, pale but breathing. She says I have not been the same since, that I wander the house at night, standing before windows as though expecting someone to appear. I cannot tell her the truth, that when I look in any reflection now, I see not just myself but a faint double, half a step behind, waiting. Sometimes it waves, sometimes it smiles, sometimes it turns its head toward the unseen door and pauses, as though asking if I am ready to follow. And on certain nights, when the house is very quiet, I hear my own voice whispering from the glass, saying things I have not yet said, remembering things I have not yet lived, promising that soon, very soon, the distance will close. Because the mirror remembers us all, and once it remembers you, it does not let you go. And so, the mirror waits. Not only in that living room, not only in that forgotten estate, but in every surface that catches your gaze in the dark. Perhaps it is waiting for you tonight, reflecting more than it should, holding on to a version of you that lingers a little too long. If you glance at the glass before you turn out the light and see something standing a step behind your reflection, don't be afraid. It is only watching. It is only remembering. And now, as the night deepens and the silence of your room grows heavier, let your eyes close. Let the whispers fade into dreams. Sleep, if you can. Sleep, and do not listen too closely to what calls from the other side. Good night, and sweet dreams.